Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to tonight's second half. Before we jump into this second half, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go, and folks, they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's second half, shall we? So, the majority of you have all heard of Luke and his family from Taylor, Mississippi. 5 generations of dealing with the walking wolves, what they call Dogman. Also, he had a kind of acquaintance with a large Bigfoot, which he called Big Red because it was this reddish colored fur. Now, the interviews are amazing. Luke is an amazing person. But when I first got introduced to Luke, this is all I had, was just this information. And it captivated me so much that I needed to speak to Luke. I wanted to speak to him. And I'm going to share that with you guys right now. Jeff, first let me start off by saying our property is only a few acres in Taylor, Mississippi. We've had the property for about 50 years, I believe. My grandfather at the time was a handyman doing odd jobs for people and worked in the town's grocery store. At the time, my grandfather George was 22 years old. He would get up at 4 a.m. and walk 2 to 3 miles each way since he did not have a vehicle. He did this every day for 3 years. Then he met my grandmother and they started dating. So when he would get off of work, he would head over to her house, which was a mile the opposite direction of his. Like any other day, he would leave her house 2 hours before it got dark. As he would head home, he would cut through a trail that would cut his trip down by 1.5 miles or so. One evening, he was heading home, cutting through the trails he took many times before. He was a mile into the woods. He felt something off, as if he was being watched. So, as he was walking, he heard something in the distance moving. He stopped, and it stopped. As it's getting dark, he had no type of light other than some matches. So he started to rip a piece of his shirt off and put some dry leaves in it, tied it to a nice-sized stick. Then took some tree sap, applied it to it as well. While this is going on, the sound of something approaching is getting louder, as it was only a few yards away, and it was almost completely dark. He would attempt to light his makeshift torch down to the last 4 matches, as darkness fell upon him. He was able to get it lit. It began to blaze, light up the area around him. Standing 20 feet from him was a monster, 8 feet tall, with the head 3 times the size of any wolf known to man. Its mouth overcrowded with teeth, arms long past its knees, bent backward legs, dark gray color, and a really upset look, like it had been wronged. The creature had evil intent in its eyes and looked like it was going to tear his grandfather to shreds. He stood there and looked at this demon's fingers, With 3-inch nails, it let out this horrific growl as saliva was dripping from its mouth like it had rabies. It charged at him and took a swipe. He was able to get out of its way and press the torch to its side, burning it badly. Its fur caught fire. It screamed in pain, sounds of a woman being butchered and a dog. He took off running for 30 minutes. His lungs were burning. His breathing was labored. He had a quarter of a mile to go. He wasn't going to make it. His torch was almost out. He was able to extend the longevity of the torch as he was resting, trying to catch his breath. A few moments later, he heard a roar in the distance and the creature bulldozing its way towards him. He takes off, in full effect, running for his life. He sees his home in the distance. The creature is closing the gap. He has accepted the fact that he was going to die. Tears are pouring down his face. He's yelling for his dad with everything he had before he collapsed with exhaustion. He came to find himself in his house. His father was in the kitchen at the time, the window facing the woods. His hunting rifle is always at the door. When he heard his son, he saw a light and a body on the ground and a massive creature less than 15 yards away, closing in. Without thinking, he grabbed his rifle, firing 2 shots, shattering the window at the creature, hitting it in the shoulder, quickly chambering another round and hitting it in the chest, causing it to flee back into the woods. This is my family's first encounter to start. I have many more. Hey Jeff, Luke here. Sorry, meant to get back to you sooner, just been tied up. So after all that has happened to my granddad, his dad never saw the creature in detail to know what it was. His father started dropping him off at work and picking him up, till he was able to fix an old car that was sitting around. As the days went on, he only saw the creature one time sitting on a ridge, which was a ways out. After that, he didn't see the thing for months. Went back to his regular life and ended up marrying his girlfriend at the time, later on having a son, my dad. 6 months after he was born, strange things started happening around the house, which was built on the same property. Tapping on bedroom windows, doorknobs being tested, things like that. It would happen on a nightly basis. One night, he stood up and waited for the anomalies to happen, which it did. As the tapping on the window, he snuck to the side of the house to flank what was making the sound. And to his surprise, it was that creature from the night a couple of years ago, with a scar on its side from being badly burned. The creature did not see him yet, so he raised his rifle, chambered around. As he did that, the creature quickly turned and took off as he was firing shots at it. Only focused on the one that took off, he did not see the other one that was creeping up on him until it was almost too late. Baffled, "There's 2 of them," he said, as he fired a shot at the other. As he quickly retreated into his home, years went by with no further incident after that. A new group of walking wolves would traverse the property by the sign of the tracks, and sometimes a visual but no interaction, until one night when George went to his son's room to check on him. There was that thing watching his son sleep. The bed was right across from the window. Anger took over him as he rushed to the window. He was only a foot apart, separated by glass. This thing smirked and walked off. I'll send the rest of the 2 in emails. The next encounter didn't happen until my dad was 3 years old. My dad had an imaginary dog friend that he had been seeing for months, and it would ask him to come out and play by certain gestures. My granddad didn't think much of it, until one day my dad says, "Doggy only comes at night," when it finally clicks in his head. It's one of the walking wolves. So he had called a couple of his buddies and explained what had been happening. They devised a plan to try and kill it. So they got a couple of bear traps, placing it outside of his son's window, blending it in with the shrubbery. So night came, his son fast asleep, George carries him to the other side of the house with his mom and one of his friends as he heads back to the room with the lights out and the window open. Him on an angle with his rifle pointed toward the window, his friend in a shed 15 yards away from the window with his rifle pointed in the direction of the window. It slowed up, but believed it was aware of the presence of his friend in the shed, so it approached the shed instead of being said. His friend screamed. As it was trying to enter, my grandfather went to the window and fired a shot, ended up missing, and it took off. The creatures stopped coming for a while. Dad grew up in his teens. His dad told him the history of the property and what goes on, that he should not go out at night. But, like any other kid would think, that he was telling him boogeyman stories to get him to come inside early and stay inside at night. So when his mom and dad would go to sleep, he would sneak out of the house and meet his friends at a lake a quarter of a mile from the house. There was a figure standing by a tree some 50 feet from him. "Who's there?" my dad said. Then the creature stood up into the light, and everything his father told him started to flood into his mind. He started slowly backpedaling, as for every step he took, the creature copied. As he got to his window, the walking wolf sped up. Diving into his room, he quickly shut and locked the window. The creature pressed its face upon the window and licked it from bottom to top. This left my dad traumatized. Didn't speak about it for weeks, and didn't want to leave the house. Eventually, with the help of his dad, he was able to cope with it. It stopped coming around for years. Didn't have any more encounters until late in his adulthood and early in mine, which I believe cost us dearly. Jeff, how have you been? Hope all is well. Sorry it took me a while to get back to you. I was in the hospital for a couple of days, non-COVID related. I had some lacerations from the back of my shoulder to the front. Pretty sure it's going to scar once it starts to heal a little bit. Not going to risk getting infected. But that's a story for another time. Right now, I have only 50% use of one arm, so I can't type with it due to some nerve damage. I have my wife Lynn helping me, or I'd be here forever trying to type one-handed. Anyway, back to the rest of the encounters. Years went by, 20 years or so, no further encounter. Life was back to normal for my family. Then I came along. I had a normal childhood, growing up, no encounters with those walking wolves that my dad and grandfather had told me about. However, at 6 or 7, I had an encounter with a woodsman, or what you and your subscribers would call a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I would play out in the front near the wood line, and it would watch me and make waving motions. I never felt threatened. I would say it came to be a friend. I would go into the woods and leave it trinkets, and it would leave me trinkets as well. It kept the coyotes away from me. This went on for years into my young adulthood. I had no fear of the woods at all. I was friends with an 8-foot Bigfoot. The closest we had ever gotten to each other was about 10 feet. I was in my 20s at the time. My life took a change for the worst. I would spend hours in the woods, more than I would spend in at home. One late summer afternoon, I was in the woods looking for my friend, and I could not find him, but had this ominous feeling that I needed to head home. So I head towards home, but I have this feeling like something's watching me, like I'm being followed. So, naive me, thinking it's my friend, call out to him, going to where I heard the noise. 40 feet away from me is this dog crouched down in the brush looking at me. Then it stands up. It stood at 7.5, 8 feet, long muzzle, dark brown, almost black fur, sharp-looking teeth. I never felt the need to carry a weapon before until then. My mind was racing. I can't outrun it to my house. It's 300 yards away. Then it points at me with those creepy finger claws. 3 more came out and had me completely surrounded. Scared out of my wits, I put my hands up like fighting this thing was not an option. Then a glance of something bulldozing its way through the forest, and came this mighty roar like it came from King Kong itself. I'd never heard anything like it. It literally brought me to my knees. I was paralyzed with fear. It was my friend. Really upset. I've never seen him that way. He almost looked demonic. Don't know if I ever gave you a description, but he was at least 8.5 feet tall. I know this because he stood next to a tree and I measured it later. Maybe 600 pounds, all muscle, shoulder to shoulder, 4.5 feet. Thickness from chest to back, 2 to 3 feet. Red, shaggy fur. No neck, traps like pyramids. He got between me and them. We were 2 feet apart as he shoves me to leave. As I take off running, one of the smaller Dogman creatures, 6 foot or so in height, proceeds to give chase, launching itself 8 feet in the air faster than anything known to man in my direction, passing the Sasquatch as he turned. He grabs it by the back leg in midair, slamming it so hard to the ground shook, then stomping its head, killing it instantly. I proceed to run again, and as I start to lose sight of them, as 3 were on top of him, I make it to the house and tell my dad everything that just happened. He calls my granddad, telling him what was going on. He saw the Bigfoot on many occasions, and they had a mutual respect for each other. My grandfather felt it only right to help him since he saved me. He went to the location that I had given him, finding the walking wolves and the woodsman, down to 2 wolves. The second was missing its bottom jaw. The woodsman, bleeding from its neck, shoulder, stomach, was losing strength, dropped to one knee as my grandfather took a shot from his AR, hitting both creatures as they retreated, yelping. He didn't go near the Sasquatch because it was severely injured and it might attack. So he stayed with it for a couple of hours, making sure the walking wolves did not come back. My friend recovered some stamina and stumbled off. Later that week, my grandmother found my grandfather mauled to death in his barn. The authorities came saying it was a cat of some sort. Fish and Wildlife came, and some other alphabet agencies came and were on the property for a couple of days. We mourned the death of my grandfather, obviously everything else around us, and what was going on the property for a while. We believed it was one of the walking wolves my grandfather had shot. I didn't have any friends at the time other than the woodsman that could have possibly died from his wounds. So my dad got a bunch of his friends, who were hunters, to go and kill the supposed cougar and mountain lion. They went into the woods and tracked the predators. They found signs of heavy gunfire and chaos that went on for about a quarter of a mile. Blood splattered all over the area. This unnerved my dad and his friends, and they quickly abandoned their objective. Not knowing whether the walking wolves were dead or alive made us feel robbed, never to get closure. This happened around the years of 2000, 2001. If Victor has any insight on that, could he please give my family closure? I never saw the woodsman that saved my life again. I did ask Victor, and Victor gave Luke a response. Luke, let me say first that I am sorry for your family's loss. Onto your remarkable family history with these beings, I think I know what it's like to have a special friend, even though mine doesn't get to roam free as yours did. Let me start by saying we received a call from the Game Warden Service of Mississippi, and myself and 2 more agents came to the area. We got there a day after they had removed your grandfather from the barn, and we traveled to view the body. After this, we returned to the area and was dropped off by the sheriff and entered into the pines after traveling maybe 3/4 of a mile. I located a large male Sasquatch, badly injured but still alive. I approached and spoke with him in a calming voice and asked if he needed help, and that myself and my friends would help him if he wanted. I finally got enough courage to move close to him to be able to touch him and asked to look at his wounds. His neck and his stomach were the two worst. We went dark and tranquilized him so we could transport him back to Virginia to our doctors. That same night, about a mile beyond that spot, we intercepted 8 dogmen and killed all of them. Then we flew them all back to Virginia. All of them were wild, and only one had a different bullet hole in its chest. After being in the doctor's side of the building for 5 weeks, once again we tranquilized your friend and carried him to Hawk Mountain, or close to Three Forks in North Georgia mountains, to turn him loose. Jeff, first let me start off by saying, since we lost my grandfather, we did not have any more encounters with the walking wolves. We heard howls and knew they passed through the property but never came toward the home. Me and my dad would walk our property every month armed just to make sure there were no disturbances or people that were not supposed to be there. So we take a couple of the ATVs and traverse the property early in the afternoon. No incident or anything of that nature. As we got ready to turn back, I noticed a path at the end of the property that goes down. Never noticed it before, so I went to see where it leads. And about 10 yards down is a hole in the ground on an angle, 4 feet in circumference. As I get close to it, it smells like death. Shining my flashlight down into it, it goes deep. And at the entrance, there was some deer bone and other animals. I started hearing breathing as if something was sleeping inside of there. Then the wind changed directions, I guess carrying my scent down into the den. So the breathing stopped. It turned into a light growl. Once we heard that, we hightailed it out of there. Later that evening, I went to my dad's house and we were discussing what that was. We realized it was a rest stop for the walking wolves that traversed our property. Then we hear this blood-curdling howl, growl, woman scream mixture. My dad was like, I think it's upset that you found its home. No, Dad, it's not upset with you. You were a good distance away. It wants me. My scent was all over the den. So I went home and did not go out for a while because of that, to see if the thing would let it go and realize that it was a one-time thing. So as a precautionary measure, I sent my wife and our 2 kids to her sisters for the week. So a couple of days go by, as I think whatever was in the den forgot about the misunderstanding. I didn't go back there. I didn't want to. It tracked me to my house and was watching me. Knew I was alone. I was not going to bring my dad into this and have something happen to him. I wouldn't be able to get over that, as I felt I was the cause of my grandfather's death 20 plus years ago. So I usually keep my .45 and my fingerprint safe next to the bed. I decide to sleep with it under my pillow with a hunting knife as well. My instincts served me well. That night I was in deep sleep. My body was trembling like I was in imminent danger. Moonlight was shining into my room. I slowly opened my eyes to a wolf in the bedroom. Jeff, it got into my house somehow and found me in my bedroom. My God, I couldn't spring up. It would have gotten me instantly. I prayed and prayed hard as I swung my hand with everything I had to be fast enough to get some shots off as it pounced. I fired, trying to scramble out of the room. As it grabbed me and threw me into the wall so hard, my body left an imprint. Disoriented and slowly losing consciousness, I fired again, hitting it in the chest. It stopped briefly for me to make it to the bathroom. I barricaded myself into it, knowing that it would be there in less than a minute. My left shoulder was bleeding, possibly dislocated. I wasn't able to use my SOCOM, which was at the side of my bed. So I abandoned that idea as the wolf started chipping away at the door. I had maybe 6 rounds left of the backup magazine. In my nightstand drawer, I knew I was not making it out of my bathroom alive. I fired 2 shots as it was trying to come in. I heard an AR go off through the missing parts of the door. I fired the remaining bullets at this walking wolf as it retreated through the front door. It wasn't a 30-minute standoff between me and the walking wolf. This only lasted maybe 6 to 7. But Jeff, time slowed. My dad's house is 2 minutes away by ATV. He heard a few shots going off in the direction of my house, jumped out of bed, grabbed his AR in his boxers, and jumped on the ATV and made it to my house in 2 minutes. As he got there, he saw that everything seemed fine, so he circled to the back and saw that the door was open and that the handle was twisted so hard that the mechanisms broke. Then he proceeded with caution. Then he heard gunfire coming from my room. He quickly came up the stairs halfway, seeing a walking wolf making light room of the bathroom door. He put 6 shots in the creature's back. Then, me firing it as well caused it to flee. I was rushed to the emergency room. I told them that I had heard a noise outside of my house and went to go see and got attacked by a big cat. Ended up getting rabies shots. A couple of other, they cleaned it up. 4 gashes. The 5th one spaced apart from where it had grabbed me, about 10 inches in length, and said that they weren't going to close it due to infection reasons. After that, we went to my dad's house and examined my house in the morning. Blood all in my bathroom and bedroom leading out to the outside. The blood outside, dark red, burgundy color, so my dad and a few of his friends helped clean up, fix the doors, reinforced them. After all of that was done, me and my dad decided to sell it due to the fact that our home is no longer safe. Jeff, if my dad was a deep sleeper or lived a few minutes further, I probably would have died that night. No questions about it. I sleep with the lights on now. I survived the Dogman, but next time I may not be so lucky. That's why I'm leaving the property behind. Jeff, sorry, got home crashed. Got met by armed individuals on my property. Asked me about the walking wolves on the property and how many were killed. Do I have a body? If I try to expose these creatures, I would regret it. That the last person who tried to put this information out met a fate worse than death and is no longer in sane mind. I think they've been intercepting our emails. Be careful. I'll send you what happened to us on the Appalachian Trail. The possibility to call you tomorrow and talk to you what's going on. Jeff, just caught up on the episodes. I was at least 5 episodes behind. Wow. Oh my God, I'm literally lost for words. I don't think he's dead from the encounters I had recently, but I do believe he is in trouble, and I will tell you why. Last week was my dad's birthday on the 20th of June, so me, my dad, and a couple of friends decided to go camping and hiking. I suggest North Georgia mountains of the Appalachian Trail for personal reasons. You will find out soon. So we took our motor home on a 6-hour journey, reaching the destination around 7 in the evening. We got settled, unhooked the ATVs, set up a campfire, and told ghost stories. It was an uneventful evening, so we turned in for an early start. It was the next morning as we hopped on the ATV to check out our surroundings. I was personally searching for a long-lost friend, knowing that I would never find him. We were armed with handguns, our SOCOM and ARs. We're in the RV. We found a ravine about half a mile away. As we were discussing where we should go next, everything around us went very silent. We unholstered our weapons, ready to engage what was making its way towards us. They sounded heavy, and to my surprise, it was a family of Sasquatch. They were not happy that we had impeded on their territory. I will send the rest in 3 parts, as to too long for me to type it all at once. So we were met with rocks being thrown at us from a distance, then whooping. One of my dad's friends wanted to take a shot in the direction of the commotion. I urged him not to. It'd only make matters worse. In the distance, I saw 3 juveniles crouching behind some shrubs as our attention was on them. The massive one was approaching from our rear and very angry. It stopped about 50 yards away and roared. My dad's friend John turned and fired out of fear, barely missing it. Then it charged at him. I got between them as it stopped, shy of 30 feet from me. It was almost 9 feet tall, red hair, with patches of gray scars over its stomach and neck. As I looked at it closely, it looked like an aged version of my old friend, which I was certain it was by the wounds that my late grandfather told us. I started crying, thinking that I had been reunited with my friend. However, he didn't feel that way. He had a look of, "I want to kill you," which terrified me and forced me to raise my gun towards him. I called him by the name I had given him years ago, Big Red, but it didn't reach him, no emotion. I told the rest of them to slowly back out toward the ATVs, and I'd follow. So, as I proceeded to back away, every 3 steps I took, he took 1. As we made it back to the ATVs, we peeled out. Then Big Red gave chase on all 4s, stopping and grabbing a log, launching it at us, barely missing us. We made it back to the RV, unarmed but shaken. Didn't go back out for the rest of the day. I was scared, confused, depressed at the same time. My longtime friend was not a friend, I remembered. The next day, still being on my mind, decided to go fishing and get this off my mind, which we did, and it helped a lot. We caught some spotted bass, a few trout. We were out there for a few hours. The area where we were fishing was about 1.5 miles from the campground. We're heading back on our ATVs, and as we are riding, we see this movement in the brush keeping pace with us. My initial thought was it was one of the walking wolves. It couldn't be any more wrong. It was one of those wolfmen Victor had been talking about. Black as night, looks like a hybrid from Underworld. It gained enough speed to take our cooler of fish and smirked, like, "I got your food and there's nothing you can do about it." That night we packed and left. I will tell you what happened when we got home over the phone. So then he contacted me via phone. The emails kind of slowed down, and we talked a lot more. I recorded those calls. They're on the channel. When he got home, there was a group of men. He and I both kind of looked into things and tried to figure out who these men were, but they were there and they set up some sort of home base in the den. Luke had went down there, looked around, this and that. There was no Dogman in there at the time. It did smell like Dogman had been in there, but there was now some sort of base set up in there. Military grade computer stuff, this and that. And a hole that went on the inside wall of this den, kind of going towards in the direction of his home, like something had burrowed. then he left in that area. And then this next couple of emails are what happened after that. Yeah, it's a long story, but here's the short version. We'll give you the full version later this week. I was walking my property, came across something in the brush. It happened to be one of the walking wolves, and it was stalking something. That something turned out to be an agent. I took a pic of it and video on my phone. I yelled out to the guy to watch out. The walking wolf got mad and came after me instead. The agent took shots and ended up hitting me and the wolf as we collided. End of email. Next thing you know, Luke is in the hospital. I get an email from his wife. Good morning, Mr. Jeff. Let me start off by saying that I was away when this happened, just able to piece things together from what my father-in-law has told me and also information from the authorities and doctors. My dad was diagnosed with kidney cancer and he lost the battle last week. So I went to where he currently resided in Whitehall, Pennsylvania, to plan his funeral. I have been there for a few days when I received a call from Luke's dad stating Luke is in the hospital in serious condition. So you can see where my head is at. I had just lost my dad and may lose my husband. I was too distraught to drive, so my sister drove us overnight. When I met Luke's dad, he told me Luke suffered head injuries from a fall and was shot twice by, I guess, an FBI agent by accident trying to fend off a bear attack on our property, which he got some injuries as well. The reason they were on the property is that they received a tip from a reliable source that my husband was involved in illegal arms dealing, and they obtained a so-called search warrant, which is a lie because when I asked to see it, they could not produce it. I was denied access to my husband. They have an armed guard watching him. My lawyer is dealing with the issue now, and Luke is medically induced coma after swelling in his head goes down. I did not turn the phone in, plus denied them access to our property. I went through his pictures, and one is attached of what he took the day of his accident. Keep you updated once he wakes up because I want to know what really happened. And that email was one of the last emails that I ever received from his wife. Thank God Luke got better. And the progression of these incidents with the Dogman just got worse and worse as time went on. And then eventually they moved from Taylor, Mississippi. Luke's dad had a run-in with the Walking Wolves, where they moved to, up in Maryland. And eventually Luke's dad passed away, which I feel terrible for Luke, having to go through that with what I'm going through with my dad, being on palliative care and not even being cognitive. It's a hard thing to deal with. I only wish I had the chance to just meet him and just say hi. I did want to talk to him and interview him, but to be honest with you, I think it would have just been a privilege just to say, hi, how are you? And, things don't always work out like we plan, do they? Anyway, with that being said, guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what continues to make this channel grow and go. And honestly, what makes it a place for people to share their experiences, ideas, and theories without ridicule and judgment, simply treated with the respect that they deserve. And that is appreciated because that's the community you guys have created in the comment section. So thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.